actually gave stats that actually set itself apart. So that now that stats are back in the game, now that level scaling isn't happening anymore with stats, that you were able to, find stats more quickly. And this could be, very rare drop chances off of like normal, low-level NPCs. This could also be, some of the first little group experiences that you see near your starting area. That, the bandits, some additional named NPCs that we would be adding in the various undead camps or bandit camps, that they would also have chances of dropping things that were better than the common tier. So that's kind of the overall paradigm there, is like, let's introduce more uncommon and rare itemization that players will have access to earlier, that actually are giving stats and feel like meaningful upgrades compared to the common stuff. And then let's let the common stuff be just that, common. Now, one of the things that we need to be careful of, and a lot of you brought this up, is that Pantheon's not EQ. I don't remember who said it earlier, but Pantheon is harder. It requires the character to grow in power more regularly than you could in EQ. I mean, my goodness, like in EQ, I could be level 50 as a necromancer and solo relatively fine naked. So there's a big difference there, and we recognize that. We need to be funneling more stats, more character growth and progression earlier and more consistently all throughout. I don't think our itemization does that yet, but we're taking steps towards that. But I guess that's where I want the conversation to start. And like I said, I want this to be more of a conversation, not just me talking. And the first thing is, there seems to be a lot of concern with us nerfing or reducing the effectiveness and the consistency of the common stuff, upgrading and staying kind of relevant to your character. And I want to hear from you guys. Do you feel like that's a bad direction, to lean more into uncommon and rare, to increase the amount of those items that drop? Because let me say one more thing. The goal is not to, I know I've emphasized camp-based play, and I really do feel that way. I want to be clear. Like, I'm not walking that back. I love camping for items. I think a lot of the magic of that has been lost. I understand not everybody sees it as magical. What I do want to clarify is that I'm not saying that camping is the only way that you're ever going to get itemization, or that static camp spawns are the only place that you're ever going to get drops. We need to have a very strong combination of camp-based itemization, more dynamic spawns. I mean, my goodness, like a lot of the quests that I'm already formulating in my mind, a lot of the NPC population that we're already formulating in Wild's End is exactly that. It is not camp based. There are, factors and times of day and like dynamic spawn locations and things that, have lots of potential, wandering or routines that are much more in the vein of kind of the dynamic and not spawn based. But just want to say, like, it's not just camp based. It is bringing back camps, because I think that's been lost, and I want to have a good, healthy amount of that in Pantheon. But it's going to be a combination. But give me your thoughts. Like, how do you guys see the common stuff relating to the uncommon?
Well, I'm going to speak up real fast, Java, because I have to leave as soon as I say this. I sat on stream prior to the patch and after the patch for about 4 hours discussing it. I think one of the major issues that's going on here for a lot of people is what feels like inconsistency. Now, given we are in an alpha state, and we all have to accept we're in an alpha state, and that's okay. But when you have creatures that are dropping, that take level 20 plus to go kill, they drop what we will call common drops. That's fine. And those had level requirements added, then had level requirements removed, and then were nerfed to the point that you can now go buy equivalent or better gear for 14 silver off of a vendor. And the response to that was that stats are scaling. And then we go out and we use those. And even if stats are scaling, we're still performing worse than we were before, but better with the vendor bought items. Not only that the common items were nerfed, but then when you take those same items, for example, items that drop off of the Usharuk, items that drop off of the rare names that we do have a hard time spawning, are now nerfed to the point that they're barely better, if better at all, than the common drops. That does not create a very good feeling when it feels like it kind of came almost out of nowhere. We did get a big post discussing how itemization would change, but the indications that were there didn't indicate this type of a sweeping change. And that's okay. It's going to happen. I think it probably could have been better communicated. And I think really that's, from what I gathered from the people I sat with and talked for hours last night, was I don't think these changes are being communicated well. And when that gets layered in with unintended changes, for example, rogue stealth right now feels really bad. After the previous patch, rogue backstab and waylay felt really bad. We're getting compounded effects from things that are unrelated, and it feels, and this is with the utmost respect being said to you guys, because I know y'all are in a very hard position. It feels rushed. So I've touched on, I can go way deeper into a whole lot of stuff, but I don't want to speak too long, and I do need to go. So I just wanted to throw it out there. It feels almost like it was, for lack of better terms, bait and switch or blindsided. And it feels like the common items, as well as the currently existing uncommon items, were obliterated. That's just, that seems to be the commonality that I got from, I think we had around 70 people on the stream last night that were discussing it post-patch.
Quick question. Are you confirming that the Usharuk itemization with this last patch, the actual like uncommon and rare drops from the Usharuk were nerfed?
So I can only comment on the items we got, because from what we were told, some of the items were removed from the pool for the itemization change. What we got were 2 of the longbows and 1 of the great hammers. And both of those items were nerfed.
I know Rotfist Monk Glove was nerfed for a monk.
Okay.
The best items right now, Joppa, are uncommon items. It seems like most of the uncommons were not changed, but all the rares were nerfed to be just barely better than the common.
Yeah, exactly. They're not nerfed as severely, but even they were nerfed to a point that it's like, why? I'll shut up.
Provide a little clarity here, Joppa, just for your benefit. Busaya had asked to reduce weapon damage on all weapons across the board, and I think that's what they're seeing.
Okay.
No. Uncommon items were not changed. Uncommon weapons, like the uncommon weapon from Godai Outlaws that are level 8 mobs, is pretty much best in slot for everybody now because it's 8 damage.
Absolutely. We were watching people offer 50 gold plus to buy the item that drops from Jorian in the level 8 AVP camp, versus having, Fade Steel weapons that are doing 3 damage. Or, here's a better one, the Warden's Blade, right? That's a not common drop out of Hallnirs. Its damage has been cut in half. The bow off of the Usharuk went from 20 damage down to 13.
Bro, it sounds like stuff was just missed. It's absurd to fucking throw a fit over that.
Yeah, I think it's ridiculous that people overreact whenever they see things that are obviously not design choices. It's obviously a standout item that's not that rare, and it's better than stuff that's really high level. That's just a mistake. So everybody's throwing a fit about it, going crazy. This is EA. We're in alpha going into EA. You shouldn't expect polish right now.
Yeah, I appreciate that sentiment, but I do want to be clear. I can understand and empathize with the concerns and the energy behind the concerns, because I'll be honest, I'm feeling the stress. Like, there's a lot to do. I woke up this morning with a lot in my mind of what I need to be working on today. I'm between now and EA, like my weekends are no different than work days. Like it's just full bore. And clearly there's a lot of things that are kind of in a mess right now, itemization wise. And my designers, Neff, Mark, everybody is strapped. It's not surprising to me that things are missed or things are, not, perfectly, cleanly all, done. But I think this is raising, even for me, it's raising some flags of like, I'm not sure that even internally we're all on the same page here, because I wasn't aware there was a call for a damage reduction, and some of that is because, you know, the times that we're able to meet and connect, the amount of stuff that we're all kind of pushing through, we need to get a handle on these things now, because we're running out of time to get this, at least in a baseline sense, as clean as it can be. So yes, you guys do need to expect over the coming days and weeks, there are going to be shifts. There are going to be things that we miss. There's going to be some dirtiness, but at the same time, it's the energy and the response that highlights for us, oh crap, you know, we've got to actually like make sure we address these things. So it's both. It's both. Like, don't get too concerned. Don't interpret too much when you see things like what's happened post-patch. Oh, their direction's changing. Oh, things are, you know, they're going in some crazy new path. That's not the case. But also don't lose the energy, because, you know, you guys are our best litmus test right now of the most critical things that are throwing the feel of the game off. If I need to spend a little more time, you know, nurturing and really scrutinizing itemization, that might be more worth my time than, you know, getting another XYZ in place or another quest or whatever, because the baseline has to feel good. So anyway, carry on.
I would say that itemization is the absolute number one most important thing in the game right now. You guys don't seem to know if you want level requirements. You don't know if you want crafted gear to be better or worse than dropped gear. It seems kind of all over the place.
And a couple months back, you guys were in a great place with the drops from everywhere.
What made it in a great place?
Just, you know, you had Gata dropping multiple items. You had the mountain there dropping multiple items. You had Heltic there dropping multiple items. And it gave us a reward feel for going into the fort. Right now, the reward isn't there. So
Okay.
why risk it? Why push in with one group to kill? You have to like really be all on your game to make it past the first like 7 spawn points in there to even get to a mob that you can harvest for loot, you know?
I think the one thing I would add into that, Joppa, too, is what you said earlier about trying to show that difference between common itemization and actual rare itemization and feeling that impact. With the things that have happened over the past couple months or so with itemization, the rare items don't have any impact, and it has caused that flat line you were talking about, and this change made it even just more of that than what your goal was.
I would agree with that
That's
statement.
unfortunate, because that's the opposite of the goal with this stuff. Because I mean, again, my understanding going into these changes was that we wanted to reduce the common tier of crafting and dropped, so that the uncommon and rare tiers of crafting and dropped would shine more so.
It doesn't feel
I-
that way. It doesn't
Yeah.
feel that way in game right now.
I think
Okay.
it will, though, when you get to your full itemization path that Neff has laid out. But right now, a week before we shut down, is where kind of the concern is, because this is also almost one of those changes that needed to happen with a wipe for us to see all the new
Exactly.
rare names you guys put in and the uncommon and rare items. Because right now, all we see is the nerf side of things, and
Exactly.
that's part of the freak out.
I think that's
I
a
agree
big.
with that. I think that there's a lot of items floating around right now that people already had, and they have a preconceived notion of what it used to be, and they're
Yep.
not seeing like
Yeah, that's
a detailed list of everything compared. And then you have these items that weren't touched that are random and better. But
And there's a discrepancy between casters and melee. Casters don't rely on the damage of the weapons, you know? So they're clearly not as in tune with that. But
Going back to what he just said about this, felt like this patch might have been better as a white patch. I would, you know, kind of this patch and the last patch. It feels, and I feel nothing but sympathy for you guys on this Joppa, but they feel very unfinished, rushed, untested, however you want to look at it. We know what's trying to be done, but it feels like the time hasn't been there, and it's creating a very big disparity between the vision.
Right now-
So when we come on stream and we're like, hey, we look at these great things and we're all excited, right? And then the patch comes and it's like, was this tested? Where was this when we talked about all this? Does that make sense? It seems like it needs to be more incremental in turning these knobs. Because we do want to see balances. I don't want an easy game. Somebody came in my stream last night. It sounds like you're just not happy with the difficulty. No, I want this game as hard as we can get it. Probably harder than most people do. But the dial needs to be turned incrementally, not 0 to 100.
Seems like when you have a two-part plan, we're right in the middle of that. You see what was changed, but you don't see what's added yet, and so it's almost like you need to wait and see. And I do believe that at EA, whenever one starts at one, it'll be progression. You'll see growth, and I'm excited to see what they're going to do with the the itemization as you progress.
Yeah.
Well, that's the whole thing. It's different, right? Like, if you guys are adding 3 more zones, like, how much of an itemization change is, like, I don't know the rare mobs in any of those zones. Like, how much of a drastic change is that going to level all of our viewpoints on it? And, like, I didn't read all the patch notes, but are stats not still working too? I mean, that could have an impact on it as well.
Stats
They are working.
But the difference is, because only weapons were changed and not armor also, we're not getting the stats to make up for, like, the loss of strength and things like that right now. That
Exactly.
would make up the difference of these weapon damage changes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think the damage changes are a good thing, though. I think bringing all the damage down overall is good. At a 22 on a ranger, you still do more damage than a wizard, even with the nerfed items. So
who's excited about hitting for 4 damage at level 31 on your auto attack?
I understand that part is bugged, right? There's something going on with auto attacks that isn't working correctly.
Well, it's not only that. There is, I mean, some of this is paradigm level too, because the abilities that you do a heck of a lot more damage than auto attack, and the abilities are the ones that also have the direct attribute modifiers as well. But I do agree that the auto attack, the amount of auto attack damage feels low. Like, it almost feels like there's something wrong code wise with the way auto attack damage is being calculated.
Are you guys not including attack damage anymore?
No,
power?
we don't use attack power anymore. No.
So
No.
spell power, attack power, are meaningless?
They are correct. We don't use it as a discrete stat anymore, but intellect, wisdom, and strength all now factor directly into damage output, and then it also creates that intentional gap for itemization to have plus physical damage, plus fire damage, plus things like that.
So it is calculated also into auto attack?
Strength is, yeah. And the plus physical damage would be as well.
Like our monks, one of our monks is punching with the rot fist. It got nerfed to only have 8 damage now, but regardless, he has 25 strength. Shouldn't that strength influence his auto attack, and he should hit from harder than 4?
This is against. Well, I mean, there's other factors, right? Like, are we talking about like a fully debuffed NPC that he's hitting?
Oh, fully debuffed. 12 people debuffing it.
Yeah, so if he's hitting with an 8 damage weapon with 25 strength and he's hitting a fully debuffed target for 4 damage, then yeah, it sounds like something's wrong.
You did that on stream though, right? Like, we saw that happen. So
yeah.
Hey, Jabba, I think one of the issues that's happening, and I brought this up before, and I will say you've reassured me with a lot of things as far as what the intent is, but I think you're suffering from kind of like unanticipated consequences with the changes that you're making. For example, a lot of the things that people had issues with itemization and the things that you're trying to fix were a result of stats not being fully implemented. But instead of waiting for stats to be fully implemented and then seeing where gear is, you made sweeping changes to where gear's at while also making stat changes. So you have numerous changes in numerous areas going on that are all kind of having disparate impact, and you can't get a baseline image of where things are actually at. So it's like you change one thing over here, but you also change another thing over there, and they're not in alignment. So not only is it creating a difficulty seeing what the intent is, but the output is hard to evaluate because you're changing too many factors all at the same time.
100% agree with this.
That's our rush.
Yeah, for sure, and it's understandable. Like I said, I don't want this feedback to be not take into consideration the situation that you're in, but it's having a clear understanding. What I think you all would benefit from would be having a clear understanding right now of what is our MVP, what is the baseline we're trying to achieve in stat impact first. And once you have that baseline, then adjust itemization. But don't keep adjusting itemization until you have that baseline stat impact, because you're just going to be chasing your tail.
Exactly.
I think a lot of that would have mixed with a wipe too. You would have seen a lot of stuff from level 1
Well,
on.
let's vote on a wipe right now.
Yes.
Hey, Jop, I was just thinking, because there's not a lot of time, obviously, but I was having a lot more fun maybe 2 production builds ago, itemization wise, the gear progression, seeking out things to hunt. If you guys are kind of able to bring that back some, do what Finn's talking about and get that back end stuff sorted out. And then you guys have all the time in EA to think about where you want to land with itemization long term and won't have your back up against a wall timeline wise. That might be a quick way to get in a more fun state quickly. And you already are aware of some of the problems that exist in that, so you'll have something to build on there as well. Hopefully that's valuable.
So if we heard, if we go back to the kind of the paradigm level of the conversation, which being like the relationship between common items versus uncommon and rare, regardless of whether that's dropped, crafted, quested, are we all generally in agreement with that? Like, what I'm trying to understand is when you guys feel the game is at its most fun, is it when common itemization, uncommon and rare are all relatively close and improving every tier, so that it's like as long as I'm improving my common itemization, then the uncommon and rare are kind of nice to have ornaments, but I don't need them?
I think
Something I'm confused about, Joppa,
I
is
think
when
you're
that-
dealing
Definitely not.
with a symptom and not the actual issue. I think people want to feel like they're progressing and getting upgrades. This
that's where the
assignment
dopamine
of
comes.
tiers, this calling it common, rare, uncommon, I don't think anybody cares about the name for it. They want to feel like they're achieving something. They want to feel like they are getting rewarded for their time, and they want different routes for that to happen, both amongst crafting, amongst exploring, adventuring, loots, farming camps, rares, whatever the case may be. But the more you try to categorize it in these rigid structures, I think you lose that flexibility in organic gameplay. I don't think people care whether they get a common, uncommon, or a rare. They just care that they got an upgrade, and they want to feel that steady progression as they play.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you, Finn. I think that's 100% on the money.
We want to feel like we are able to scale our characters as we move our characters up in levels. The player power should scale in some way with that, whether that's through the acquisition of attributes, whether that's the acquisition of gear. That's a conversation that we can continue to have. But if I go kill level 5 bandits and I get a weapon that gives 2 damage, and then a few days, weeks, however long we scale it to right later, I'm killing level 20 bandits and I'm getting a weapon that's 1 DPS higher, and it doesn't show whatsoever when I'm stabbing. Am I scaling? Not really. If it takes getting the super ultra 1 in 1 million drop that has plus stats and 5 more damage, okay, well, 10 people will have that. They'll feel like they got scaled, but no one else will. And so that's what we have to balance is I want to be able to scale my character. I want to feel like as my character levels and moves to new, more challenging, difficult areas, I am growing, I am getting stronger, and I'm able to take on these new challenges.
And I think one of the issues, and I've mentioned this in chat, and I think Neff has commented on it in chat as well, is that the way that you have your formulas set up and the way that damage resistance and mitigation works as you level and fight harder things is it's like you gain more damage and more ability to bypass mitigation as you get higher so that you can fight harder content, but the numbers themselves don't often change. So even though you're accomplishing more things, you're fighting harder content, the feel, and I'm using air quotes here, is limited because it's like you got an upgrade so that I can do the same amount of damage to a harder mob.
Exactly.
And you kind of lose that feeling of progression, but that's just because of the way that you all have your math built out. So I don't know how you get around that, but that is an impact.
And I'll just say this anecdotally. When I was watching you kill Drakes the other day, and you were going up, I don't know, a few points in strength, it was only going up, very little damage. And even me just watching it, I was like, that doesn't feel as good as you would see in like some other game when you get another weapon or you get 5 more strength or whatever the case may be. It just didn't feel as weighty.
Yeah.
I think a big thing is too when you guys did the stat squish a couple months ago, where we went from getting up to like 40, 50 strength back down to like 20. There was no adjustment in that scale of power.
Do like the small numbers though.
Yes.
Well, the
I do
reality
like the small
was
numbers.
the strength wasn't doing anything. Strength wasn't doing anything. But we had so many things going on. We had attack power. We had, a lot of additional things that were like it was so broken code wise that weapon damage and strength was like really not even working like at all. It was all just flowing from the internal components factoring into your attack power.
How come buff stacking worked?
Because it was contributing to your attack power. So,
oh, okay. So the extreme amount of strength and dex we were putting on people, it was
exactly
offsetting their attack power.
Exactly. It was offsetting weapon damage and offsetting, really anything else that would be contributing to it. So now weapon damage works. Now strength works, but I think the aggregate is that it still doesn't feel as impactful as it did before because attack power was able to get so high through various means. So we do need to figure that out because I agree that I agree. I agree with the feedback.
I just want to say, I feel like right now a major issue is weapon scaling more than any other piece of gear. It's like trying to figure out how much do you want your auto attacks to do. I think the major problem with your design right now is weapon speed. The only way to get a better weapon is to get a weapon that does more damage. The speed really doesn't change any. A two-handed weapon is like 3.2, and the fastest weapon is like a 1.4. The distance between those speeds is very, very small.
Really?
Yes. Incredibly small.
Until you start looking at abilities. If you want to see a great difference between them, it's all based around ability damage.
Right, your auto attacks mean nothing. You have nowhere to scale to. You're hitting so fast early that you have nowhere to scale to. There's no room for anything except for your weapon has more damage. That's it.
Q, we had rusted, then we had tarnished, and then we had fine steel, right?
Yeah, like your first weapon you find in EQ has like a 54 delay. Like it's like you have so much space there. Your damage can come up while your speed goes down, but then you find another item that has 5 less delay, but hey, has 2 less damage. But I'm gonna do the math on this and say, okay, this is better. Instead of just 10 damage, 1.8 delay, 12 damage, 1.8 delay, and it just goes up and up and up.
Hold on, I need to like.
And I have a
Think
question
about like
the,
what is a 1.8 delay weapon? That's an 18 delay weapon. 18 is insane. There's nothing in Kunark nothing in Classic EverQuest, and I know this game is not EverQuest, but there's no item one-handed weapon in EverQuest base game that has an 18 delay. And we're starting with it.
Well, if you look at a Rusted Morningstar in EQ, like classic EQ with like a 44 delay versus a Rusty Dagger with a 24 delay. So you got a 44 and a 24. I understand you saying like, let's say the Pantheon's equivalent, you take out the decimal, right? So a 24 Rusty Dagger versus an 18, it's in the ballpark. The goal we're trying to do between like the daggers and the swords and the maces and the axes and the two-handed weapons is we're trying to create a meaningful distinction delay-wise, but it could be that it's not. It could be that it's starting too low, and it could be that the gap is not wide enough between the faster and the slower weapons.
If there's no distinction in damage between these uncommon items, like let's say rusted, tarnished, worn, sturdy, the fade steel, all these, then what would be the benefit in picking those up at all?
Yeah, the difference should be in the speed that they're attacking. Because
Yeah,
you
it's
don't
all
want
too
to
fast across the
constantly
board.
you don't want to be moving damage up every single time you get a better weapon. You want to move something else on that weapon.
Well, then that's part of the goal of these last changes was to make delay actually more of a factor in upgrade as opposed to just straight damage. But it sounds like delay is not enticing.
Well, how does delay tie into the issue that you may run into right now? Is most of your abilities are based off pure weapon damage. I mean, other than auto attack speed, is delay factoring into anything else? Readiness generation, ability damage? I mean, where else does that factor in?
No, it doesn't factor in anything other than auto attack speed, and auto attacks are
so then
worthless,
it's
anemic.
That's the, I think, again, let's find the core issue here is that you're trying to fix something that only impacts one small area. So the impact of weapon damage is always going to be exponentially higher than any change you make to weapon delay.
But you can't start balancing something without changing what you can balance.
Sure, I get that, but I'm just saying long term, the design of weapons and how their itemization works is being built around a factor that doesn't really impact anything, and that being
at what
delay
stage
speed.
do those weapons gain a new tier? Like right now you got uncommon, they're all dropping, like I said, fade still up to fade still, but in EQ you got Velium, right? That jumped up the damage a few numbers. Where's that? Where are we gonna see that? Those are still common drops, but the numbers did raise.
Like Fade Steel should be a little bit stronger than rusty stuff you find off of Bandit.
And a lighter weapon, maybe with a less delay, since it's a lighter weapon.
Well, it sounds like because auto attack is not a meaningful part of your damage, that anything we do to try to make a progression in the common tier is going to feel meaningless. Because, so take EQ for example. If you walk through the rusty, tarnished, bronze, fine steel progression, the difference between a rusty dagger and a fine steel dagger is 5 delay. It goes from 24 delay at a rusty up to a 19 delay at a fine steel. That feels meaningful. Like you feel that on your character. It feels faster. It looks faster, and the damage of auto attack.
The damage stays the same also.
It stays the same, but
3 damage.
The other difference in EQ is that as you level up, you're getting baseline bonuses to your auto attack damage. So a level 30 character auto attacking is naturally doing more damage because of that built-in bonus.
Exactly, character power.
I think you need a damage cap anyway. You need a damage cap at 10, 20, and 30.
We need a cap, but we also need. I think we also need. Yes, we need a cap. That's a different conversation. But I agree with that, and that cap opens up at certain levels like it did at 10 and at 20.
30 should be removed entirely, right?
But we also need to figure out where auto attacks need to sit, because right now, and this is what's interesting to me, because what you guys are telling me, but again, this goes back to Finn's point, where there's how many things are still incomplete enough where they don't feel like they're factoring in enough to be part of the equation. And if by level 30, currently playing through Pantheon, there are not enough avenues to get statted gear and upgrades to statted gear. So by the time you're level 30, you've got a pretty decent chunk of bonus strength, bonus dex, whatever, it is factoring into your damage output. The damage that you guys should be doing through your abilities should feel like it is growing significantly. Like you should be doing a lot more damage with your abilities at level 30 than you do at level 1.
We do.
And but what I'm hearing is that doesn't feel as satisfying altogether. Like because auto attack is still so low.
Yeah, auto attack is pointless.
Okay.
Yeah, but aren't we kind of comparing apples and oranges here too with EQ and Pantheon in the
Yes, for
early
sure.
levels? Because you're talking about Pantheon, we have a myriad of different abilities to use early on, and they are more impactful. Whereas if you're talking to melee on EQ or something, you're going to feel the difference in that itemization early on before you get your whole spectrum of abilities. It's kind of comparing apples to oranges, but yeah, I think that you guys would benefit from kind of what EQ did in boosting your stats, like even if it's a point,
Yeah.
as you progress.
That's what I was going to bring up, Joppa, is like innate primary statistic growth. Like I feel like it's got to be there on some level because a level 20 should do more damage innately than a level 1 in auto attack with the
And what
same
was
weapon.
that player advantage we were supposed that was supposed to come in with this patch, right?
No,
Wasn't it like we should destroy a grade mob at level 20, level 1 mob?
that's still forthcoming, but it wasn't planned for this patch.
Oh, okay.
I think Joppa, if that was tied in, this would have made a lot more sense.
What, the advantages to lower level NPCs?
Whether it's the advantage or because you had spoke briefly that you guys were playing with the idea of some kind of innate primary statistic growth, like every 5 levels or every 2, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
I think that separation needs to exist to say, hey, a naked 20 is stronger than, no matter what, is stronger than a naked level 1, and he's going to hit harder.
Yeah, I think that's the primary piece from an internal perspective. I know certain people feel differently, that there needs to be some kind of power growth attached just to
Don't
being
stress
higher.
though, Joppa. We know you're under a crunch.
Yeah,
You're all right.
this is,
we all want to see EA do well, and for you guys.
Yeah.
but I think that's the primary piece of the equation that's missing in all this weapon and itemization balancing is you're feeling forced to tie everything to gear, where some of that progression can be tied to simply being higher level. Your
Yes.
character is growing.
Right, like
100%,
your
100%.
character's going, I did all these sets and reps, or your player, sorry. Your player's going, I did all these sets and reps. I've been benching 225, taking it in the face for my group at Manor or wherever it may be. I want to be stronger as a warrior, and he's not.
Now, can we agree though that when we talk about being stronger and progressing, because balance has to be thought of here too. I mean, balance is really the point in the end, where if people are saying fights are too easy, they're too fast, this kind of feedback. So when we say getting stronger, we're not necessarily talking about the fights getting easier. We're talking about feeling like I'm doing more damage or seeing bigger numbers, but not necessarily affecting the outcome of like how fast a fight is or feeling like I'm shaving, 10, 15 seconds off of a kill. It's just the fact that the numbers seem too static. Is that?
Yes, it's exactly that. There's a very big difference between the speed, the time to kill in a fight, and feeling like our abilities and our attacks are impactful during that fight. If I go up against, let's say, Ushuk, right, and that fight needs to be a 4-minute fight. We're just throwing wild numbers out there, right? Whether that fight is at 4 minutes and I'm doing 5 damage a swing, or that fight is at 4 minutes and I'm doing 50 damage a swing, one of those feels way better at level 30, right? And so I don't think anybody in this channel wants the game to get faster and easier. I think we're all in lockstep with you on that. It's that players want to feel growth of their character, progression, and we want to feel impactful with what we're doing. When I push that button for an ability, I want it to feel impactful. When I just got a brand new two-hander, but I'm swinging for 1 more damage than the two-hander that I've had since level 5, and I'm now level 30, that does not feel impactful.
That's just
And
in light of
we
the
shouldn't have the
recent
same weapon
changes.
for 25 levels. Like, we should be able to progress in different avenues. Like, a big thing, and I bring this up because you like Unrest, Joppa. We couldn't go in there and fight those mobs without a magic weapon. So, where's that aspect? Like, that's a big restriction, like a gate, right?
Mm-hmm.
I also think
that like we need a magic weapon to go fight those mobs.
Additionally, you've talked in the past, and other players have even called out that the only form of progression isn't direct itemization gear upgrades. We're missing, we're missing mastery system. We're missing, I don't even know what we're, a lot of stuff that would add nuance to the feeling of power progression. But because those systems aren't in the game, again, I'm pointing back to you're making changes, and depending on one sphere to encompass everything when you're missing half of the puzzle pieces that you're ultimately going to have to play with. So it's like we have to feel all of our progression from gear upgrades, because that's the only thing that's really available right now. And it is creating, I think, an unrealistic expectation for your itemization goals.
Correct.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. So, and there are a lot of ways that could be addressed, but it's important to take note as players, like Finn just said. Yeah, we don't have mastery. So, has the team, and this is, I'm just throwing this out there, Joppa, so feel free to be like, we're not going to talk about that. But has the team arrived and said, okay, with mastery, we expect this percentage of power growth? Okay, if we've arrived at some form of a ballpark number in there, put some band-aids on it that allows that percentage to be added right now. And then when mastery is ready, we can unveil it and we can iterate over that and start bringing that into play to replace that band-aid number. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, the reason we disabled mastery is because we wanted the baseline ingredients to be what felt good and felt right. Because mastery was too much reliant on direct power growth in its
Exactly.
initial implementation. We want to do something with mastery that makes it a little more interesting, where there is some power growth elements to it, depending on the ability, but that it's a lot more leaning into like secondary and tertiary effects, and even just changing the nature of certain abilities, especially if we go more of a choice-based approach to it, as opposed to just filling it all out completely.
Right.
But I do think mastery matters, but it's not necessary to get all of the baseline ingredients feeling good. So things like, what is auto attack contributing? How is there any innate power growth happening, regardless of itemization? Those kinds of things are important to this baseline equation. And then also, again, the most frustrating thing to me right now is just the lack of general special itemization that there is to find and get in the world. Even just minor upgrades. Being able to go and fight the ruffians and the burglars and the shadowy thugs right near the starting area, and come away with, weapons that have, plus physical damage, or a strength or a stamina or a dex or an agility on them, or an intelligence dagger, something even just very small that starts to kind of like build in that paradigm. And in that sense, the common itemization, it's like it's there, but it's not like being factored into your main form of like, this is how I want to progress. And I'm still unsure if that resonates with everybody else.
I think common unstatted gear is something you should be looking to replace every time you play the game. You should expect to replace it every time you play the game. And that's your hope. Then an uncommon item that has one stat is something that you're hoping you can upgrade within the next few levels.
Yeah,
and then a rare item is something that you're not expecting to upgrade. It's a surprise when you do upgrade it.
I would agree with that sentiment, and I think you kind of touched on this earlier, Joppa, is maybe there are not enough of the uncommon, or especially not enough of the rare items out there to chase right now. There are some, but you have to really, and this is not a bad thing. Before I say this, don't hate me, everybody.
No,
knowing where to go to get them, is not always the easiest thing. But then also, and I'm not saying that this change that happened last night was bad either, but let's take like the Outcast Shiv. Okay, 8 damage, 1 dex item. It's now a 4 damage, 1 int item.
Completely different item.
A lot of people just went, what did you do and why did you do it?
Collective Twin Fang Dagger, or Collective Crystallized Twin Fang Dagger is another perfect example. It went from being a 12 damage, 1.4 speed dagger with 1 strength and 2 dex. It's now a 5 damage, charisma, and what's the other stat? Mana and something else. And it says straight on it that is warrior, rogue, ranger, and bard. That's what it says is on it. But the stats totally don't support that unless you're going to make it a bard-only dagger.
That just seems like a mistake. I mean, and that's where it's hard to tell what's intended and what just.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's
Exactly.
Well, I mean, that was.
I will say that those
Somebody
class
did that.
restrictions are a miss on my part. So, for that particular item.
And as a caster, I love that we're seeing, a bunch of new caster gear come in because it didn't feel like there was any. But it also dips the pendulum in the opposite direction, kind of,
I agree with Leon in that maybe it's the number of items that aren't in there. This is just anecdotal, but I went on P99 wiki last night just to look in lower Guck. I mean, that's higher level, but there was 50 rare drops in lower Guck alone. So I mean, maybe it's just the sheer number of items as well.
Yeah, I think you guys need to definitely increase the amount of gear that characters have the chance of getting within the game.
I agree.
100%.
Like that chasing gear, whether it's like a random like Gadai that you kill that gives you a +1 strength stat, like those small things keep players in the game and wanting to progress their character. I think that's really, really important.
I think that's
across the board.
Classic WoW itemization. People can crucify me for saying it. Was amazing.
Agreed, 100%.
Those of you that are worried about me following too closely to the EQ approach for itemization, like I can assure you that is one area where we will and have to be different. There needs to be significantly more itemization available to players, and the itemization needs to be stronger sooner to kind of keep up with how the game ramps. 100%, and that is not currently reflected in the game right now. That's something that I'm realizing on this call that needs to become a priority, for us in these next few weeks, is getting that in a better place.
Shouldn't it be more like along the lines of what Belius had out? Like in terms of how many items are in game?
Well, let's think of what made, there's Velius, but what made classic WoW so good itemization wise? What I remember is that they had the prefix itemization, which I personally didn't like, but a lot of the reason I didn't like it is because of the naming convention. It felt contrived and whatever. But we can still have a similar spread of uncommon items that are able to be gotten much more easily by players, much more consistently by players, by doing the content around them. And then we have, that's another big thing that I want to see us do leading up to EA as much as possible, is the introduction of quests that have, good items at the end of them. We need to get, rare crafting schematics, uncommon crafting schematics in where these things can be made as well. But we need more of that stuff. And even in Classic WoW, with all the itemization that existed, you still wanted the blues and the purples that dropped at the end of instances. You still wanted, to complete those quests that had the really nice item on it. And that is kind of where I think Pantheon needs to land, more so than it is now.
I think you hit the nail.
Because our quests got worse.
Yeah, I was about to comment on that.
Yeah, like the Moonshadow Cloak just got worse.
But not only that,
the Tattered Cloak it didn't get worse. It just didn't. There's a Tattered Cloak that drops off for a level 4 mob that is better.
you go through and you do all the scavenger quests. You want better tools. The final tools give one stat each. That's cool. It gives you a good reason to do this quest instead of just going and buying them off the merchant. But now all the stats have been removed. And right after stats are super important, it's like, okay, well, why spend the 3 hours plus going and grinding these quests when I can just buy the tools off the merchant or craft them off the blacksmith?
the stats from the tools were removed because we didn't want to make players that didn't want to engage in like the crafting stuff feel like they had to, as like a best in slot out of the gate, do all those quests, have tools. But again, the problem here is that hasn't been replaced with anything else. So
That's an interesting choice.
I mean, stats are important. I'm level 34. I have very high agility and dex, in my opinion. With let's see, with no buffs, 21 agility and 28 dexterity. With no buffs at all, no food buffs, no buffs of any kind. I don't feel like, with it being said that stats supposedly make a big difference. I don't now, especially. I don't feel that having that number of stat is impactful. And if I look back and I think about those poor guys down at level 5 or whatever that have basically no stats, I mean, my God, it's got to be crazy. How
I think it
must
worse
feel.
for you, honestly.
Yeah, it does.
In some respects, it does. Like, I am not high strength, so I'm a rogue. I don't get a benefit off the gear that I've geared for now. I've got like 8 strength, so I don't really get much of any auto attack damage boost. And with the change on physical damage on weapons, it's pretty significant.
But,
and all of our attacks are geared specifically for Dex and Agi, which I think is a good thing. It should be. But I think that if you're going to gear for Dex and Agi for your attacks, then they should deal damage, not just dinking away at mobs.
I don't want to take the conversation away where we're going because I think there's a lot of good stuff going, but I want to go back to something you just said right quick, Joppa. The stats are taken off of the questing items because you don't want people to feel obligated to do that. Don't you feel obligated to go pursue any statted item in the game if you want it? Regardless of whether it's a quest or a drop from an NPC, and you have the ability to opt into doing that or not?
Well, imagine if like once the perception system is more fleshed out and there's, after grinding the perception system for a little bit, there's a really good cloak that you can get that has adventuring stats on it. If we do that, of course we can do that, but I would rather, instead of there being a tool at the end of a long gathering related quest line that you can get that gives you +1 strength, I would so much rather have a really involved adventuring quest line that at the end of that gives you a slot that, like, the gathering tools are, I don't necessarily want there to be adventuring stats on gathering tools. I would rather there be gathering and crafting stats on gathering tools.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
But it's just that we don't have an alternative right now for and that, guys, I mean, that's what I woke up this morning geared up to do, is like get in here and start like grinding out a lot of the quests, because we need a lot of quests in Wild's End. But I wanted to start introducing a lot of these kinds of quests more on the adventuring side. Neff's been doing a lot on the gathering side with quests to create these quest chains and like all this stuff. We need the equivalent of that on the adventuring side, not only for the newbie areas, but sending you out into higher level areas, Hounder's Cave, like all these places with, really good itemization on the other end of finishing those. But without that, taking out the gathering tool stuff is felt because the equivalent wasn't put back in for the adventuring side. But that's the reasoning behind it.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, if the idea is, hey, we're going to drop combat stats off of these in the hopes of putting gathering stats on here, cool. Yep. I think that would be a great thing to communicate.
Yep. That's fair.
Joppa, you said something and then you kind of stopped, and I want to make sure that I don't misinterpret what you said. I kind of got the impression that you were going down the route of saying perception, we don't want perception to have adventuring rewards because people would feel obligated to do perception. Am I reading too much into that, or was that what you were kind of trying to imply?
Well, my opinion is, and this comes largely from the way that I play these games, so I'm sure it's biased. I have to be very careful with my biases, but this is probably my bias. When I play these games, I don't want to feel forced into doing anything outside of the adventuring sphere. I'm not a big crafter. I plan to be a very big perception player because it's something that I've always longed for in these games that we've not had. So I do plan to be big on that, and I am excited to reap the rewards that come from that. But in the same way that I don't want to be forced to do crafting and gathering, because I feel like for my class there are slots that, you know, the best in slot for whatever given level is if I am a weaponsmith or an herbalist or whatever. I want to feel like I have equivalents in the adventuring sphere to do that. So I think my stance on this is more, once we get enough adventuring equivalents in place, I probably won't be as concerned about there being alternatives that can be gotten through these other systems. But right now, because there's so much lacking from the adventuring side for quests and, you know, just adventuring gear in general, I worry about, you know, there being these growing other alternatives, because it feels incongruent to me. I do want a player to be able to log into Pantheon for the first time, not care one iota about crafting and gathering or perception, and just go out into the world as an adventurer and have plenty to do. And I don't feel like that's the case enough yet. So that's where my hesitation comes from. It's not that I don't think we'll get to a point where there can be those kinds of things. But I also, like I said, there's plenty of like keeper related bonuses and perception specific bonuses that can come from things that don't have to translate into adventuring stats. Same with crafting and gathering. So that's where my mind would be first, is like, how can we create itemization and rewards that benefit the sphere itself, as opposed to, I'm going to get a really, you know, a plus mana regen item from being a keeper kind of thing.
I can see that. I guess this is where my bias comes into play, is I'm actually hoping that perception, as opposed to being its own separate thing, is deeply ingrained in adventuring, so that it isn't a separate sphere that has to have separate itemization and separate reward tracks. It just ties into adventuring. But that's, again, like you said, that's my bias for it. So
I think what you said there was an important note. When you first started off, it was like, oh God, you know, it was, hey, I don't want to be forced into doing anything. Yeah, okay, that makes sense, but it kind of gets scary. But then you kind of realigned and said, I want there to be enough rewards in any sphere to make it feel like you're not forced. Yes, yep. I agree. But I also kind of agree with what was just said. I think that was Finn speaking. Still learning voices. The more these systems are tied together and the more rewards that exist, it is a la carte. You choose what you take part in. And I get it as somebody who's played every MMO under the sun, and probably to an unhealthy point. I get it, the feeling of, I have to go get this item because it's the best in slot. But at the end of the day, that really is a player perception that we're never going to cure. If something is 0.1 better, the min-maxers are going to say, we've got to go get that item.
I don't disagree.
And that's okay. Just make it an adventure to get there.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean,
you should be rewarded for digging into those systems. I'm sorry, man. I didn't mean to talk over you.
No, I was just going to say, you were talking about quest depth. I agree. I like some of the quests that are in the game, and I don't want to say too much because some people may not have done them, but there's a quest, I'll simply say, that culminates at the fort. And then you have to do something after that. I'll leave it at that. And there is a very good jewelry slot item, which I would consider currently to be best in slot for most classes, certainly for melee classes. I like that. I like that it's not just some 2-second quest that you go burn out and you're like, oh, look at me, I got this great deal. It took effort to get to that point and to kill the actual final encounter. So I think that's great. And those kinds of quests, I think you're hitting the nail right on the head.
I like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we just need more of them.
Yeah, I
Jabba,
agree.
Quick question, Jabba. Is it fair to say in a few months' time, maybe after professions are in at some point, that you could equally have crafted and quested or adventured dropped items all over your body and still be viable?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, part of this pass, like this literally the pass that we're in the midst of right now, was to reduce the effectiveness of commentary itemization, dramatically increase the amount of uncommon and rare items there are in the world, and and make them good enough where they are like undisputably better than the common tier, and rares being undisputably. I mean, I've told Neff and Mark both, like, I want the rare items to be like, there is absolutely no question, this is hands down like significantly better than uncommon items, and uncommon items are always better than common. So that should give you an idea of where these uncommon and rare should land when you loot them. And I understand that's not the case right now, so that's something we have to fix immediately. But also part of this pass is, like I've said, I do want to move away from customizable stats on armor and weapons, crafted armor and weapons, where you can, choose like, I want this stat and this stat, but I want to dramatically increase the amount of rare, uncommon and rare schematics that exist, so that players have just as many uncommon and rare items that they're able to find and craft as dropped. And the result of that is you should be excited to get a rare or uncommon material, a rare or uncommon schematic, and be able to create rare and uncommon crafted items that rival the rare and uncommon drop, so that, I would absolutely expect players to have, a combination of all of these things and all of them viable. And that's what's exciting to me about moving away from customizable stats on crafted armor and weapons, is that to me, that change alone makes it so much easier for me to embrace crafted armor and weapons being on par with adventuring, because we can create intentional gaps and overlaps. We can have, a crafted sword, a rare or uncommon crafted sword that is just as good as a rare or uncommon dropped sword, but then we can also have gaps where at certain level ranges, the best stuff that you can get for this slot and that slot is actually crafted if you can find these recipes and make them, and so on. So yes,
I actually love that concept because it creates a very nice synergy between I want to craft, I want to adventure, right?
Yep.
One of the big concerns it automatically brings to me is the amount of schematics you're able to hold. It's already not fun. And that's going to, depending upon, so obviously some of these schematics have been said that they will be one-time uses or limited use, which I think is great. But that is something that as we're doing this needs to be taken into consideration. Now, given that will change when we can't do every single skill in the game, I know. But even if you're doing a single skill, your schematic bag gets pretty full already.
Yeah, I'm into D3 and I've got 4 slots.
Yep,
But I could take out some old stuff.
So, just so you all know, the intent for the schematic bag was never for it to be permanent. Eventually, those schematics will go into your codex or something like it.
Okay, beautiful.
And you won't have to manage them in a bag like you do today.
100% approve that idea. Thank you. You just put my heart at ease. Yes.
Quality of life right there.
Thank you.
Is the plan for name mobs still to drop crafting ingredients? Rare crafting ingredients?
Please?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a big piece that's missing right now too, which again comes back to just having the time to do all the things that need to be done and getting rare materials, rare schematics. I would love early in the game's life, early in a character's life, for there to be dropped items that are known and like well known and have identity, and there to be crafted items that are known and well known and have identity. Man, I hope that I can find this schematic, because I know, weaponsmith that can make this weapon for me. I hope that we get it, because it's an amazing weapon. It's one of the best swords there is, at this level range kind of thing. I want to hear and see things like that, but I want it to all be driven through that, like, we are going out into the world. We are excited when we see a named mob. We're excited when we kill anything, because there's a chance that, most things can drop something somewhat valuable. Like that's where I want us to get to. It's
what
very
about, like,
clear.
the Gadai symbols and the Lutherian, emblems and all of that coming back? Is that coming back as well?
Oh yeah,
probably. Yeah.
Yeah, oh, it definitely is. I mean, it'll at least be coming back for the Gadai insignias were initially made and I think they worked this way back in the day. They were initially put in as a like Crushbone Belt, Nullfang type idea. We wanted there to be places where we can do these repeatable quests for grinding faction, and just like a way to get coin and a little bit of experience when you come back from spending time in those areas. On that level, it'll definitely come back. Where we really need to engage our quest system and various things is allowing for, once you reach a certain faction, for example, standing, that it opens up a new quest maybe that allows you to get like a really cool weapon or a piece of armor or something like that as a result of doing those things. And that's just going to take time.
The Gadai insignias are a good example. They're actually used in 2 different quests right now, and to get that item, I forget who it was that someone was talking about earlier, you have to do those 2 quests as part of that quest chain. So you can expect that as time permits, we'll be able to do things like that in other areas.
Well, I'd like to ask a question that's probably going to get a lot of eye rolls. I love you all. I'm sorry. It's been stated in the past that there's a non-VR internal testing team. It may or may, if that's still a thing, has it been considered that perhaps that testing team needs to grow a bit to allow for better seamless inclusions of patches like this to really feel what the impact is going to be? If you can't answer that, I understand.
I mean, it's not that I can't answer it, but it would be just giving my stance on it, because there's other people involved in the decision-making process for that stuff. The reality is, like, with our team size and our cadence, you all are really our testers.
Sure.
Like, we have an internal testing team, yes. We have 2, like, on our actual team, we have 2 people that are that oversee QA, and that's Mark and Cody. But as you guys know, they're both like flat out on actual game dev stuff that they're very limited in what they can do on that front. So the reason that I want us to do more patches, honestly, and maybe this is like a paradigm shift for you guys, I'm not sure, but I view you all as our testing team. I view you all as like receiving things, whether it's polished or rough, and working through that to help us, identify what isn't right and where things are. But in some cases like today, yeah, it feels like we just kind of flush the toilet and whatever comes out, you get. I know it feels that way. It's not intended to feel that way. It's that we are literally moving on so many things so quickly that whatever the flashpoint is where the patch goes out, that's when it goes out. And we don't have the luxury of, and this is about to change, and that's why I've wanted so much for us to do rapid patches, because what's about to happen with EA is we can't really do that. Like
that was my concern. Yeah.
Yeah, we have to wait and make sure that things are like, this is actually like live ready. Like,
right.
And I have some concerns there.
I'm 100% down to be a guinea pig, and that's exactly where I was going with this. Up to this point, that's 100% been acceptable, and I would applaud that decision. But in 2 weeks, yeah, exactly. That's kind of where I'm going. Is can we get maybe like hey, these are our long-term pledges, backers, testing, where when the patch goes to staging, let us play it before you put it in the EA environment.
Yeah, I agree with Jadian. I think you're jeopardizing your game, and not to sound overly emotional with this, I think you are jeopardizing Pantheon in the long term if you don't do this.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
I would love to play that server and test. Sorry, Jeff, I didn't mean to talk over you.
Yeah, no, you're good. We've definitely discussed it. Sam's aware of the need for us to have, not a public test ground, but like something where our VIPs can, and long-term backers and others can engage with the stuff. I mean, yeah, yeah, and also not only that, but setting it up where one of our big issues right now is like we can't make live changes in real time in these testing environments. So when you guys find something that's relatively small, it would, there's a lot of I mean, even on streams, you guys see me do it all the time. I fix something that you guys are like, hey, did you look at this? No,
right.
I look at it, I fix it. It would be great to be able to push that right into your testing environment.
Yeah.
And we can't do that right now. So as sophisticated as a lot of our backend stuff has become, we still have a few things, not that we can't do it, but just that it's a time factor of I mean, guys, getting things ready for this EA has been insane. Like the tech team, the networking side of things, the back end, like it's been crazy. It's been flat out. And you know, the reality is a lot of our team members are part time, and so they don't work part time. Like I want to dispel that. It's what the reality is. They're part time on Pantheon. They work full time on Pantheon in addition to their full time because they're just so invested. But it's like, even still, when you've got, you know, a total of 3 total back end guys, tech guys, as amazing as they are, like it's flat out. So some of these things that we want to do, we can't do yet until there's some bandwidth.
I mean, Joppa, just looking at Discord numbers, right? You have 921 potential internal testers right now. Just on VIP.
Half of us are in the coding or networking industry.
That's right. There are a ton of IT professionals here that would bend over backwards. I tell you every day. I just told you again. I will happily come work for you for free.
Oh, I know. I hear you.
Joppa, I'd like to ask, if I could ask a question just real quick, and this is just kind of a question and general feedback, and this is notorious, by the way.
Yeah.
I've gotten some friends to come over lately, and honestly, they were big, you know, naysayers about the game and stuff like that, but I can say they generally love the game. They're having a blast, so on
Good.
that front, I want to commend you guys. And the same thing that was just kind of being said, some of these guys are coders and, you know, developers as well in their day jobs. But the one thing that most of my friends and guildies have said the last couple weeks of testing is, and this has been brought up, and I've been a VIP for about 2.5 years, and I've kind of felt this too, though. My highest level character has only ever been 26, so I will say I've never made it even to 30 plus, to be fair. But the one big thing we all agree on is none of our characters feel like they get more powerful as we go on. I mean, yes, we don't know every item and things, and I know this is still being balanced and changed, but it's felt this way for 2 years, if I'm kind of being honest, where it's like at 25, 26, I don't feel that much stronger versus when I did when I was 12 or 13. Maybe sometimes even a little weaker. Though granted, I know the tanks haven't had all their abilities, so I will say that, to be fair. The kits, I know, obviously are not complete, but, like, what are we doing to, you know, battle that front? Because I feel like there's multiple people that's kind of felt this way as well.
We just spent an hour talking about all that, man.
Shit, I probably came in late then, yeah.
Yeah,
apologize.
but no, don't apologize. I mean, it just continues to reinforce the fact that, like, this is one of the most important things that we need to address, and I feel it too. I really do. I've been trusting the process with Mark because we've had a lot of balance. Like, I'll say this, and I think most of you would agree, in all the different iterations we've had throughout the years, I think the balance of the game right now is more solid than it's been in a long time, maybe ever. Like, all things considered, and I don't mean to say that it's like we've arrived or that, you know, anything like that, but I'm just saying the overall balance and the maintaining of that balance through the level ranges feels relatively solid, especially in comparison to the way things have been. But that being said, that's just balance. That does not account for, like, the psychosomatic reality of, does the game feel good to play within this balanced paradigm? And I think one of the biggest issues is the disconnect between how my character is progressing, the felt experience of the progression of my character through the numbers, through, you know, the kind of, like, those upgrade points that I'm getting along the way. That is not good right now. And I agree. I hear it. Okay. And that's something that we're going to be starting to work on today. Like, Neff and Mark better hold on to their butts because we're going hard on this.
I appreciate it, Jabba. Like I said, sorry to ask another same question. Thank you.
Yeah,
Can I give you some immediate positive feedback?
Hey, I'll take it.
On a specific skill.
Yeah.
Two big patches ago, Rogue Backstab was way out of control because the math under the hood was wrong. I was the guy that was hitting for 1,465 up at Graveyard. Now, post that first patch that fixed the problem, backstab felt very bad. I will say that after last night's patch, backstab is improved, and I'll give you honest feedback. It is not broken now, and it is not overpowered now. With full buffs at level 34, at Graveyard, I was able best backstab 190.
Nice.
So it's definitely a little bit better than it was. It's not a lot better, but it is a little bit better, and it is not broken like it was pre 2 patches ago. So
How is your stealth feeling?
stealth is not as good. I will say this: stealth in a place like, and I'm going to use Usharuk and the Wyvern Cave as an example, because before this patch last night, I could go in there with no stealth items on, but using my passive stealth ability and not get popped out of stealth. I went in there last night with no stealth items on, just using my base passive skill called Like a Ghost, and I got popped out of stealth 3 times, died twice. To light blue con mobs, which before I didn't have to worry about it as much. Now, not wearing any kind of concealment gear makes a difference. So any rogues in the channel, heads up on that.
Another great example of we built concealment as a stat to be something that, you know, allowed you to see your stealth go from marginally useful, depending on the situation, to very powerful, depending on the kind of gear you had. And that's gear that doesn't exist in the loot pool. So
I think that's really good, Java, but once again, it wasn't mentioned in the patch notes. Rogues, your stealth now matters, or concealment now. You know, it was kind of lumped in with stats.
Well, sorry. Let me clarify though. I think something may have broken with stealth for it to, because I'm not well. Let me back even further up. I'm not aware of any changes that were made to concealment. Mark usually does a really good job of like breaking down anything that's being touched. I haven't seen or heard a single thing about that. But in a lot of the other things that have been touched between the last patch and this one, it's possible that something could have broken there. So I need to look into that one further. I'm not sure if it's a stat change for concealment or if it's something different. But
to give you some way to duplicate that without just wandering around aimlessly, before, let's say let's use a war chief hut as an example. Generally, there's a guard on either side of the door. If you're going to go into a war chief hut pre-patch, you could generally walk through and you would hear the guard recognize that something was there. They'd be like, huh? And they might turn to face the door. And if you stood there, then they would investigate. Last night, 3 times walking through a door, not all the time did I even get the huh. Sometimes they just turned and knocked me right out of stealth. So that's, if you're looking to duplicate it, that's about as best of information as I can give you, because I was only willing to give up a full bubble of EXP to test that. So
Yeah,
Java,
Gotcha.
just wanted to mention people had a wonderful offer of help and everything, but just so people are aware, there's legal ramifications for a company accepting help without compensation, and I think that's what VR struggles with right now.
100%.
You know, and Swarm is wonderful, by the way.
Unless we're privately contracted as consultants, consultants don't have to get paid.
I mean, here's the thing. I appreciate so much the offers to do that, and I understand where it's coming from. And honestly, the passion that you guys have, I can't say it strongly enough. Like it is the thing that is going to see Pantheon through the remaining storms that we have to get through to get to where this game needs to be. You guys staying passionate, you guys staying connected, fervent in the feedback, you know, all that stuff, and the desire to help comes from that same place. I am not the guy to talk to about that. I can float that there's interest, but I do not. I just don't dabble in that side of things on purpose. I don't have the bandwidth for it. So, if any of you have a desire to help, like if it's a tech thing, and you want to reach out to Olmo, Sam, and say, hey, this is my background, this is what I can do. I will leave it to them to work out like the legalities and like how all that looks. And that's all I'm going to say. But I do appreciate it very much, and I'm not going to say whether or not there's a path there. I just I don't. I'm not the guy when it comes to that stuff. Yeah.
How dare you not be the end all be all?
I know, right?
Come on, Java. Quit shirking your responsibility, sir.
I tried to be for a little bit, and it didn't.
You'll kill yourself.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I've grown up since then. I've realized I can't actually do it all, guys.
This patch definitely is not all doom and gloom. I sat down, I went through the patch notes on stream 3 different times last night, and at one point it was to add up, what the people that were on stream, which doesn't speak for everybody, I get it, felt were positive versus negative. There were a lot of positive changes in this. There are a lot of good things came out of it. And I think we've talked very much about what some of the bigger negative points were, and I think it's more miscommunication or lack of communication than anything else that could alleviate that. The only reason I keep pounding that is as you've already stated and others have already stated, 8 days till EA. Please, please, please be aware of this as we go forward. The incremental path versus the sweeping path.
Yep. Okay. This is really good. I'm going to probably say it's a good time to stop because there's a lot to do. But this was so good that this might be a good thing for us to try to do a little more often in the coming days, especially once we bring servers down. I mean, the streams are going to be part of that, but there's something about being able to connect like this too, because I can hear you guys and there can be an actual dialogue. I think continuing to do this will be really, really good because it'll make sure that you guys know much more clearly exactly what we're doing or what our intentions are. We'll be able to get more direct feedback. I'm not going to try to put a schedule on this, but we'll try to find a way to do this more often, especially post patches, post updates, but then maybe incrementally too. So, are there any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
It should be in the forefront of the dev team's mind that we're all available to keep testing during the downtime before EA.
Yep.
If you guys have a patch to roll out and you need us to test it, let us know.
Yep.
It might be a good idea to do these conversations while you stream. So
Yeah.
that people that aren't aware of it, that normally watch you, will be there to hear it or jump in the conversation, and that does give it a little bit more of a schedule thing. You just dedicate an hour of your stream to having an open conversation.
Community
Are you
roundtables
guys
are.
going to behave?
Absolutely.
I was actually going to comment on that, dude. I am very proud of everybody in this channel right now with how civil and straightforward this is going.
Yeah. Well, the thing of it is too, like in this medium, like it doesn't have to be as civil. Like you guys have been extremely great, but I just want to stress again, don't worry about being critical. Don't feel like you need to pull punches. I mean, you don't need to personally attack me or anything, but it just be as honest as you want to be. Not saying that you haven't been. I feel like this has been really good, but please feel free to be as constructively critical as you feel like you need to be. Streams are a little bit different. They're a little bit different. So I'll think about that. But whether we do that or not, I think doing this calls like this will absolutely be something we can do. And it doesn't. I mean, doing a big, wide, broad, open call on stream is not the same thing as from having some kind of a schedule in place where a certain number of people from the community come on and join those, and I can kind of rotate that group and make sure that everybody gets a chance. So there's lots of things we can do there once I have some more bandwidth to think about how all that can work. Yeah, it's a cool idea.
Yep. I think end of the day, everybody just wants to see the game succeed. So
Yeah, 100%.
And
I know that.
2018, so
yeah.
One thing that would go a long way from this type of stuff too, Joppa, is it has been years now, and I know the Greens, we all fight about it all the time. This is great for communication, but like a follow-up post for those who can't join of what your takeaways from this would be, kind of deal.
Yeah, I
This
think
conversation.
that's fair. It just makes me have to write, and I don't like writing.
I know, I'm sorry.
There are tools for that, Joppa, where you just
I
record
know.
this and put it through the tool. Just saying.
Well, I say I know. I know that they exist. If you guys have an idea of how to do that and like have a program in mind, feel free to DM me because
I'll shoot you one.
Yeah, GPT does it.
Yeah. Okay.
D-Man, what's up? Ah, he left
Yep,
the channel. Dog.
You destroyed our druid.
What did you do to my druid? What have you done?
Yeah,
I
this
tell you what,
postmortem
yeah,
was
I laughed
awesome.
So hard when you told me that story. It was amazing.
Catch y'all later.
Hey, Jabba, the cadence that you guys have put out over the last 18 months or year has been really, really fun and exciting to see. Like, I know you guys have a lot on your plate. I just want to tell you, like, from the outside, I appreciate the work that you're doing. I know you have a lot going on, right? And we're here to support you, right? I know you get a lot of criticism and stuff, and I'll give it to you when I feel it's warranted, but I need to tell you guys, you've been absolutely killing it lately. I love the pace. I love the attitude, right? I love big, exciting, maybe unattainable goals, but like keep it up, right? Get some good sleep, eat well. If you need a bowl of smoked turkey gumbo on Friday, DM me. We'll talk, okay?
Thank you, man.
Yeah,
Appreciate that so much. Yeah, thank you all. I do. When we feel it, we feel the support. Like even when things are, like today, and there's lots of concern and criticism and stuff rolling in. That doesn't blind us to the support and the excitement and you guys just being invested in this being the best it can be. So keep it up. Let's wrap this up. I'm gonna drop. I will. I'll connect with you. I mean, I'll see you at least on stream tomorrow. But we'll do this again, and I'll try to have some feedback at least by tomorrow of some of the immediate changes that we'll make. I need to get some time with Neff and Mark and just do some of my own processing after this. But we need to get started on these adjustments immediately. So I'll have an update on that tomorrow, and we'll go from there.
Hey, drop one quick last idea to prevent you from typing. How about you start your streams with what your collective thoughts were from this, and then I can clip it and put it in the dev tracker.
Yeah, let's do it. That's what I'll do.
All right. Thank you, Joppa.
All right, guys.
Thanks,
Thank you all.
VR
Have
people.
a great rest of your day. Adios.
Have a good one.
Easy.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Bye.